Hey everyone, it's Merja here. I hope you've had a good week. It's great to be here with you today and just to get some Q&As going. We had a couple of questions for the group this week, so I might just get straight into it. So the first question is from Sheena. True abuse must happen 100% of the time to be considered abuse. It occurred to me, this is how I think. I wasn't abused in extreme forms, sexual battery, etc. So I rationalize it to not be too bad. I tell myself they didn't know better because my grandparents were aggressive. I also would like to believe that my issues aren't that obvious to most people, so it can't be too bad. I'm sure they are. Forgiving people is easy for me. I will always find the good in even the most evil people. How do you stay angry with people when you understand the reason for their issues? So, Sheena, that's a fantastic question. And I wanted to take this opportunity to answer this question via video as opposed to typing furiously the questions into your actual post. And thank you for your flexibility. For those of you who don't know, I have dyslexia, so typing and reading is particularly difficult for me. But doing a video is the easiest way for me to address this. So thank you so much for wanting a video response. So abuse is hard because there's actually a lot of, not all abuse is quantifiable. And so there's both quantifiable abuse where, you might have been raped, or you might have been, battered, or you might, physically been abused, or financially abused. So sometimes, when somebody else is using your money, it's really clear that they've used your money, so they have abused you financially, and therefore it is easy to kind of prove that the abuse has happened. But then there's a lot of unquantifiable abuse, which can be something like, making snide remarks, things like familial emotional incest, which is, assuming that the child plays a different role other than a child. So the parent often that engages in emotional incest, they treat the child as if the child isn't a child. So they're treating the child in an inappropriate way. So for example, asking the child to be their friend or their confidant, that's emotional incest, that's completely inappropriate. There are other times like enmeshment where, the child or the other family member, you're in such a deeply codependent relationship with each other that you you feel like your existence is reliant on the existence of the other person in your life. So you're enmeshed, you're doing everything together. Those kinds of things, and those can't often be quantified, and that's the challenge, where you can't draw a hard line to say, hey, this behavior is abusive. And especially if you've seen your parents struggle, especially if you have always felt like, because your parents are having trouble and because their parents were like this or like that you understand why they're behaving towards you in that way. Now, that doesn't actually mean that it's not abusive behavior. That just means that you're able to have compassion towards your parents. And that compassion, it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand, as an adult, it's great to have compassion towards your parents, because all the parents really do the best that they can, generally, unless they're sociopathic. So it's great as an adult to have that compassion, but if you have to have that compassion ever since you're a child, that's actually inappropriate behavior, because the child is supposed to be looked after by the parent, not the other way around. So if you've had these feelings from ever since you were a child, where you go, okay, you know what? I understand where my parents are coming from, I know it's hard for them, I'm going to forgive them, then you are probably missing out on a very important part of your kind of structural development as a person. And we all have these rites of passage. So as children, like as 2-year-olds, you know, the terrible twos, which really aren't terrible twos, you know, they're just the person, the young person establishing themselves as an independent entity. That's what that is. That's a rite of passage. You know, then having, you know, your teenage years where you establish yourself as this person who's moving from childhood into adulthood, that's a rite of passage. Those are all really important things to go through so that you do establish yourself as the individual that you are. So if we haven't had those, if we've always understood our parents and we've always kind of, inverted commas, given them a pass on their behavior because they've had it hard, then you may not have actually gone through those rites of passage properly. And that was certainly something that happened to me. I never had the terrible twos. You know, I was talking to my mother about this, and she said, you were the easiest child that was ever born. You know, you only ever cried when you were really, really sick. And what she didn't realize was that I wasn't being a good child. I was terrified. I was terrified. And that's why I didn't cry. And I didn't cry because I knew that nobody would come to help me, even if I was crying. So it was more, I was a good child because my heart was broken, not because I was healthy. And so I wonder, Sheena, for you, and for a really long time, you know, I had that. I said, I know my parents had such a difficult childhood that, you know, their experience was so much worse as children. I understand and I accept that, you know, the behavior that felt abusive to me, I accept it because I understand it. And that's not actually the same thing. It's one thing to understand what's going on, and it's a whole other thing to allow yourself to be treated in a way that's not right because you understand. And of course, you can't do anything about that when you're a child because you don't have the cognitive capacity to, you know, be there for yourself. You need that from your parents. So Sheena, for you, I would say, you know, it's not so much about holding on to the anger as it is about just saying, you know, that wasn't right, just acknowledging that that wasn't right, and then asking yourself to be treated differently going forward. So you were saying, how do you stay angry with people when you understand the reason for their issues? You don't have to be angry, you just, I hope that we would just learn to set some good boundaries. So I hope that that answers that question from my perspective. I really appreciate you asking that question because, you know, it's such an important challenge that a lot of people go through, and I want to highlight it, and just to let you all know you're not alone with this. This is, you know, unquantifiable trauma is so difficult because it's not quantifiable, because it can't be quantified. So, you know, and if anybody here is struggling with this unquantifiable piece and you want to work with a mentor, one of the mentors that I trained, Amelia Harshfield, she specializes in unquantifiable trauma and emotional incest and those kinds of things. And so I really recommend that if you feel like, hey, you know what, there's something going on there, I know something's wrong, but I don't know exactly what it is, then maybe just talking to Amelia is a good idea. And you're a part of this group. If you haven't used your free one-to-one session with a qualified mentor and you're struggling with this particular thing, just comment in the comment section of this video and I'll put you in touch with Amelia, and you can have your session, your exploration call with her, and just see if you know, she can help you. And I'm confident that she can get you started on the right track. So comment in this, make a comment in here in this video, and just say, I'd like some more information on unquantifiable trauma. I'd like to set up a time to talk to Amelia, and then we'll take it from there.